Bible analysis for the human life template that's in there. Boy, I've been struggling with this, not really having a direction, not knowing what to do, not talking with people. I think that there was something that I was missing, and I'm starting to see parts of it now at a deeper level. Accidentally. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. There's a human life template that frames the stories in the Bible. That's very old, and it's very, boy, it's a mental puzzle. You have to play it out in the mind. It's very tough to do, and it takes time. They had these memorized, and they were doing it as a matter of course on a daily basis. We're looking at it really from a distance as we're reading the stories. We're not engaging with it as if we had it in memory. We can't see it happen. We can't close our eyes and have it all unfold in our imagination. They could do that, and that was critical for us to understand that deepest layer. I'm putting a lot of time into it now, so I'm coming up with some stuff. But you know what? I don't have it memorized. I'm using the computer, and as a result, I'm fumbling through things. And in the last video, this is what happened. I started off at chapter 12 doing a micro-macro numbering system, and I'll post a link below to that. But what I wanted to do was put some notes and start making comments on chapter 12. But I didn't want to do it in my digital copy of the King James Version. It'll ruin that copy. So it's easy enough to just copy chapter 12 and start its own document right there. And then I make all my notes and everything there while leaving the original King James Bible intact, which is critical. You don't want to add numbers to it. I want to search that thing while it's just empty of any notes or comments, just the Bible itself, just Genesis. But then the chapters, I want them out of it. And what happened in there is that I began to do the word search that I've learned to do for the entire Bible, and I realized right smack dab in the chapter, they're using that sequence. They're using it, boy, this is tough to say. There's a numbering system. Let me just pull it up. I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, first of all, if you recall the analog count here, for everyone else, these numbers are numbers that are repeated throughout Genesis and occurring in a patterned sequence. In fact, you know what, let me cover that a little bit better. This is how I at some point in time, I look at it and say that's their code. I'm looking at the Sodom story right here in Genesis, and what I'm talking about is that if you get down here, the Lord said, because of the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I'll go down there. And he's getting ready to bring judgment on Sodom. And the men turned their faces from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. So Abraham is standing there, not going on. But if you go down to 19 here, and there came two angels to Sodom at the evening, and Lot sat at the gate of Sodom. Right there it would pick up. If you... let's see. It was right up here where Abraham drew near. So between verse 23 and verse 33, if you took that completely out, it would sound fine. There would be a good flow. What it's doing is putting numbers in here. And you will also see that Abraham's name is said 5 times down here at the bottom. It is closing it out by saying Abraham twice. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communion with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. So that repeat right there, I'm going to say that doubling up is closing out what opened up here. Righteous being said 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we've got our 50 said 4 times. Would you destroy it for the lack of faith? Then there's a lack of 5, 50 righteous, lack of 5, 40 and 5. So 5 there. We have to understand that this isn't 45. It's a 40 and a 5 when they do their numbers like that. The same thing is going to happen with the 840, the 912, the 930, or whatever they are up in the Adams analog farm. Those are going to be numbers that are doing something similar. And very literally, that is the code that is nested in the story that we don't have access to because we don't have it memorized. This numbering system, it's out of reach, but it's right there. Then we get up where the 800s and the 900s are. You can look at the other video to get into more detail on that. 800 is appears with like a 12 or a 40. And 800 is said 7 times. 900 is said 7 times. So they're using numbers then. So this is the collection of numbers that I've got. It isn't complete. There's still something I'm not getting. It's old stuff. But I will tell you, if it sounds goofy, that I'm going to suggest that we see patterns of numbers in the Bible, and that these numbers right here, I searched them out, Googled them. There's 22 numbers there gathered up as analogs. Those 22 numbers are repeated over 6,052 times in the Bible. And sometimes they combine them. A 40 and a 7, for example. 47 would be a good thing. So, all right, so those are the numbers that we're dealing with. What it's doing is it's helping me follow a pattern that is a human life cycle template hidden in the background, but there are nested clues in here that if we had the story memorized, we could follow. I'm trying to find them now without having the story memorized. Okay, so what all of that leads up to then is the chapter 12, isolating chapter 12 out of the King James Version, putting it over here to put notes and things on to keep the Bible intact, like I said, for searching for numbers. I don't believe the carrier shell. I don't believe anything supernatural in here. I believe it's all natural. It's going to be mentally interactive when we get done. Mentally interactive. Anyway, what I have here is just chapter 12. It's fairly short. So just out of force of habit, every time I open up a book of the Bible on my computer now, I start looking for that number and word grid. And I'm going to see Lord, Abram, country, kindred, father's house, land, things like that right up front that I just know automatically. I want to search for those because if I had it memorized, I would know what those were and they would be meaningful to me. I've learned that now, that this is not in my mind. Lord. 7 times in chapter 12. That's a critical number. See, it's on our list. 7. It's part of the 7-3 grid. 7 was said 3 times. Abram. 12 times just in chapter 12. Abram is said 12 times in chapter 12. Country. Just the one. Let's see. Land. 8. So that's bad. So what we know in the stories, this represents us. We're going to be leaving. We're going to be starting our life, and we're going to be going to a bad beginning. We're going to have a bad childhood. In fact, since it's an 8 like that, then you go back to the Garden of Eden, the Adam and Eve story, and say, if that's us in the beginning and the first sin is our exposure to life, that's what we're seeing here, the same thing. It represents exposure to life now. And I mean exposure to life that you then judge and begin to become a product of those thoughts and memories and the emotions. In fact, this land of 8 is where your first agreements come from. Yeah. It all unwraps. This means we're going off to the first place we lived in life, and that does not mean the place we physically lived, but the place we lived in our minds. What was that like? I know what it was like for this stupid piece of shit. Sarai. 3. Sarai is a pure inner wife, self. But look at Sarai, his wife. Wife, what? Wife is 8. So that means bad. So our inner being is going to go bad in chapter 12. You see that? So it looks like what is emerging to me then is this. Not only is the name count through the entire book critical, through the entire book of Genesis, but at each chapter along the way, the name count is going to vary from good to bad, depending on the stage of the journey and what component they're using. So it looks thicker than what I was thinking to begin with. I want to play with something and take a look at that very quickly. I was thinking, well, if I need to do this through all of them, I should go chapter by chapter, 12 all the way to the end. And then I thought, then I should go back to 1 and start there. It's going to take a long time to get through it all. I shouldn't start at 12, go all the way to 50 and go, I should have started in the beginning. I should start at the beginning. Let's go to Genesis and just take a look at some things. I'm going to isolate chapter 1. All right, here we have it with a slight variation I need to talk about. And it goes from chapter 1 all the way down to, I've got actually the first 3 verses in what Langton put as chapter 2. It actually changes chapters down here in between this doubletting of words and the beginning of the Five Rivers chapter. So why he put the 2 there is difficult to say, unless he was trying to link the 3 and the 7 right here. So I brought that over just thinking I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I think this was the original story, and that's what I want to search. Well, we'll just see what happens. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to see, first of all, I'm going to see things like God created, heaven, earth, form, void, darkness, face, deep, watch, God. 35. Created. 6. Heaven. 8. See, that's bizarre. That one right there makes you go, wait a minute. It doesn't sound right. And you come all the way down here to look at them, and you see one of them is split out into chapter 2. Langton pushed one of them out of the first story to make it 7. If I go by chapter and take this out right here, well, God changes too. Let's see what happens. Let me just try that real quick. Is God still good? Heaven. 7. That's what we want it to be. See, I don't know what's going on because of that overlap, and one of them goes in that chapter place right there. I don't know what Langton did. 7th and 3 has to be there. Anyway, okay, well, let's look at some other things in here. Dark. Face. Spirit. Oh, the one Spirit of God moved across the face of the waters. Water. 11. Wow. Things emerge from the waters. Well, it's just a number count. We'll have to, this isn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily make sense at first. We'll have to figure it out. Firmament. Nine times. Evening. I guess that would make sense. Morning, even, same thing. Yeah, because that was, and there was evening and there was morning. The 6th day, that was a 6th-day creation. Fowl. Birds of the air. 6. Creature. 3. I'm going to show you something right here. Creature. In chapter 1, 3 times. That means creature is good. If I go to Genesis now, I mean to the entire book of Genesis. Hang on, give me a second to navigate my messy desktop here. That's what I got, King James, the entire one. Yes, okay. Creature. Creature was good. 8. Now creature is bad. Okay, why? Why does that happen? The analog shift. There's something very common going on right here. If we got to chapter 6, where we find that the beautiful daughters of men have been corrupted and they've given offspring to the Nephilim, that represents the same thing here. That in the beginning there's a purity. Whatever we have inside of us, the animals, the creatures, they represent our inner qualities. Beautiful daughters of men represent inner qualities. Later on, the creature becomes corrupted. Now we have to get rid of this stuff. So, what I want to say is it needs more analysis. You can see that. There's some very patterned stuff in there, but there's a few anomalous things that make me go, yeah, there's some structure adjusting going on in places that I don't, Somebody knows something and we're trying to figure it out from the outside. Peeking in the window, wiping off a dirty spot. Seeing that Indiana Jones warehouse. Oh, crap. But then, you know what? It's more like having a key to go in and you can open up all the boxes. That's what it's more like. And it's like, whew, there's a lot here. All right. So I think what I need to do then, instead of going back to 12 or, redo 12, I need to add to it now that I see what I see. But what I need to do actually is go back to chapter 1 and start there. Honestly, there's some things that need to be identified in here that haven't been. And now that I see that if you isolate each chapter and search it, you're going to come up with something different that there's a layer there I was not seeing at all. All right. It looks to me like somehow the book of Genesis would be the life of a person, but it's also the creation of a religion. There's some things in the front, some analog farms and the Babel story, the separation from Babylon to here, despite the fact that it's obvious where it came from. Noah's name is repeated 41 times in Genesis. It's repeated 41 times. Marduk, the first call in the Enuma Elish Babylonian, 41 times in the Enuma Elish. The parallels are so striking that you have to see that it's the same. Also, however, that whole flood couple of chapters there, 7, 8, 9, it's really a kludge. It's quite a mess. You can see there's different things that have added in. There's 2 different callings. One of them where you're supposed to bring 2 pairs of everything. Another one is 7 pairs of clean. That go with different parts. There's some blending going on that does make it a little sloppy to read, but they kept the word count tight. They also repeated some processes. It's one of a number of places where a 7 is grabbing a 40, where 7 and 40 are connected together. And in some case, you might see that as, well, here's a 800 repeated 7 times and a 40. Okay, you have to know that 800 transitions to acting like a 7. But right here in Genesis, it becomes a visible pattern. You just look at it and accept that it's a pattern. For in 7 days I will have it rain for 40 days and 40 nights. In 7, 40 and 40. And in 7 days I did have it rain. It did rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Grab the 7s and the 40s. 7 is pointing to 40, repeated twice in 2 different occasions right there. And here, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not just the numbers pointing at each other, but then they cross-reference in a manner such as this. 7, if I search that, it's 72. But if I pull out all of the 7th, the 7-fold, 70, and I just take it down to the 7s, it's repeated exactly 60 times. Now, 40 was the other one. Not only was 40 gathered up, but 40 is also very carefully repeated exactly 15 times. A 10 and a 5, a 15, it's already been gathered. So it's not just pointing at each other, it's also themselves repeating the same amount as another good number. That's how you spot the code. But again, you'd have to have it memorized. You see how thick it is. But also throughout there's a 17th that is also a 17 that's being developed. And that's going to be a number that features predominantly as one of these. Sarai's name is repeated a total of 17 times in Genesis. Sarai's a good quality, is a good pure quality. I guess my point there was that I was going to be getting to was that even in the entire flood story, the blend of things going on, they're also collecting analogs and still pointing at analogs and still making sure you know them. So you can see that it comes from a variety of sources. It obviously existed at different times as different stories that became one and got blended, but they're blended in a bizarre way. So that part, like the entire Bible from creation all the way up to chapter 11 is choppy, rough. Not until chapter 12 on does it start picking up a flow, but they still put an analog farm in there in the Sodom one. That's the only one. The other 2 were previous to that, the Shem, Terah, Adam, that sort of stuff. Those have already been done in that whole area too. That's another part. Those are just like plugged in. So, but the code simply, in its simplest form, if we were to do a 7 and 3, if we were just making up our own, you might have a story where throughout the story, if it's repeated exactly right, the word 7 has been repeated 3 times and the word 3 has been repeated 7 times. Somehow the story flows in such a way that hides that in there. But you seeing the repeat would know to count it and go, okay, the 7 and the 3 are meaning the same thing. That's how they're encoding a verbal story. How else would you? In a very simple encoding process, then that 7 and 3, it moves on to first sin, which is, connection to life, now judging life, which becomes the 8. That's when the circumcision begins and things like that. And then you can begin using things like, oh, I'm going to repeat this name exactly 8 times. That's the bad side. I'm going to repeat the other person. Here, this man had 2 wives. Let's go look at that real quick. Here we have it. I'll just pop it up real quick. I've been using this as an example. I just remember it. But if you haven't seen the videos before, Lamech took to him 2 wives. This is always going to play out in the psyche. Lamech is always the consciousness. 2 wives is always going to be a divided inner self. One was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. If we go look up these names over here, what we will see is that Zillah is repeated 3 times. So Zillah is going to be our good half. The other one was Adah. 8. Adah is going to be the bad half. Then when you go through the story, if you're confused about what's going on, these are like, take a left, take a right, turn here, grasp this. I mean, the more you dig into it, the more you see that there's more you're not seeing. If that makes sense. All right, so it looks to me like the entire book of Genesis would probably be the person. This is a life. From creation, here's some story elements we're going to put in, and then adventure. Meanwhile, we're creating it in such a way that it's going to control the masses of the population. But here's the healing adventure that it's framed upon. That's what we're looking for here. Not the people that say it's true or that, no, it's completely crap. No, there's something in here that we're looking for that's actually mentally interactive with. And we can find it in the patterns and analyze it and interact with it and actually affect a personal healing. But that's what's happening here. It looks like, okay, as each chapter moves along, here's how you create. It's going to start good. It's going to go bad here. There's a healing here that happens. And then as each step goes along the way, though, the numbering pattern that's in there is giving us clues as to whether it's good or bad. And that's what it looks like to me, that there's something here to be played out if we can access it. And it really, what does it take? It takes thought. You have to put it in your head and do it. You can sit with the computer and do it. I mean, I'm doing a lot of stuff in my head with this material. You can't just read it. You have to figure out, what does it mean? How does how does a father die inside of their son? There's some clues in here that have to be identified. If it's an iteration of you, and those are analogous terms, and your earlier self died to a later self, oh, yeah, perfect. That's what it means. But treat everything exactly that same way. And we'll get through it. But yeah, all right. I see now as I sit and do it, there's no sense for me to keep going on to 13 from here. Now that I know what I know, I need to stop, take a fresh start at chapter 1 and do this process right here, because it's going to reveal things that I was not seeing before. Whew. Okay. That'll keep me busy for a while. And really, all 50 chapters need to be done. But there's going to be some weird stuff. There's some blending. They're not the same author. Up to 3 different authors, 3 styles, some overlapping of things. But the number counts are going to get us through there, because somebody putting them together maintained that very well. If they put 2 stories together, they made sure that the repeats were such that everything was still okay. It didn't mess up the number count at all. It shorted up. And in 3 places, Adam's lineage, Shem's lineage, and the Sodom story. Those are analog farms where all those numbers are gathered up. Look how weird they are. Look how weird they are. We got to stop and gather those. Those require analysis. And when you see that they're all like numbers pointing to each other. 7 points to a 30 points to a 6. 30 is repeated 6 times, by the way. 6 is repeated 30 times. Oh yeah, and the 7 over here is repeated 3 times, and 3 over there is repeated 7 times, which then goes out and grabs a 40, which is repeated 40 times. It's like it's a number network that you wouldn't know it unless you do what I'm doing or you had it memorized. It's a pathway in the numbering system. Once we determine what the repeating is, it's a cyclical repeat. It is. And a lot of numbers represent a common starting point. All those repeating ones represent a common starting point. So a lot of it is already solved. If you wanted to download a Bible and do this on your own, I only recommend the King James Version. I see so many modifications now in later versions, I don't even want to fuss with them. I went through a lot. I spent a lot of times between different Bibles at one point in time and realized so many changes are being made. The Septuagint, which is the Greek-derived version of the Torah, and came down through that lineage. Wherever you find that, the 7-3 isn't there. What there is God finished on the 6th day, and then it went into 7th day said 3 times, or said only 2 times. So the 7-3 reference isn't right there. And additionally, Noah's name is only said 40 times. One of the occurrences was removed completely, a short sentence that didn't matter anyway. Look how many times Noah's name is repeated. And Noah got in the boat, and God talked to Noah and told Noah, saying, Noah, I need you to get into the boat. And Noah listened, and Noah did as God. At some point, you're like, do we have any idea who this is? Bam, 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 bam. Code. Repeating numbers, repeating names, repeating cities. What's their value? 40 is a good number, but 41 was a good number. 41, however, linked it to Babylonian works. Had to get rid of that. Yeah, there's a Marduk was said 41 times. We don't need Noah, the first called in Genesis, also being said 41 times. We're trying to get rid of those common things there. Yeah, there's a short little sentence completely removed. I don't remember where it is right now. I don't want to go find it, but you want to look at what I think is some like behind the scenes bantering between people in the background. Look at this one right here. I'm going to bring up this from the Book of John here. How come it's, there we go. No, there it is. 41, so it's 41 right there. Marduk, Enuma Elish, his name is repeated 41 times. Noah is the called hero in Genesis, which, what do we have? Enuma Elish, creation. Genesis, creation. Marduk, first called. Noah, first called 41 times. When we get down to the book of John, look, we see word is repeated 41 times. And all the way down to Galatians, Christ is said 41 times. You can see modifications. You can tell people know in the background and are not telling us, because you can see adjustments being made. Some of the other ones, the NRSV and things like that, or the I find this numbering pattern in Gnostic material, but I don't in any way, shape, or form put any faith in the material was so fragmentary, but also that the people that were interpreting it were excited about Jesus representing something different, and they interpreted it as if Jesus is a real person. And I don't know if I completely trust the interpretation. Parts of it I do, because it's just a matter of translating words. The Gospel of Thomas is pretty good. Other ones, I don't even want to mess with it. I do have the entire Nag Hammadi, and I've read it, and it does follow that pattern. But it goes into such a their analog shifts so much you'd have to stop and learn a completely different language. They're following the pattern. They know what they're doing. They're staying on the template as well. There's just different styles. Some people tell you to turn inward, and some people tell you to turn outward. If you turn outward, that's strengthening the shell, the carrier shell. But you have to know that, no, you turn it inward, regardless of what people say. Turn outward to God. Never, ever, ever. You always turn inward. If they're turning outward, they're doing the wrong thing. They're part of the blind leading the blind, the many called, not the few chosen. You stop listening to people and you turn inward. But again, fragmentary nature. I'm going off all over the place. If you're doing the word search here, you see what I'm doing. I'm getting to a point where it's like, oh my gosh, go chapter by chapter, and then do the entire book complete. There might even be sections within there, repeating areas between, every even number or something like that, or every 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Maybe there's another section in there. I don't know. There's probably going to be more reveal. I'm blown away at how much just keeps showing up. It gets deeper and deeper. It's kind of a fun adventure. It is. All right. Yeah. Power up the Jeeps and let's go. Alrighty. Well, I will refocus then and start creating videos that do this just chapter by chapter. Yeah, that's exactly what needs to be done. I can see that now. That is the direction I need to go. All right. See you in the next video.